I just finished a morning experience with a process called World Cafe, which involves getting a room full of people divided into small tables in small group conversations of 4 to 6 people around the topic of the day. And the topic for this morning's conversation was collaborative leadership across generations. Something I didn't give much thought to until literally the moment that this meeting started today. What happened for me was a few things. One was revisiting the meaning of collaboration, the meaning of leadership, and the perspective of different generations. And what I discovered on this call, it was a virtual experience, and so there were 3 different small group conversations over the course of the morning. And what I discovered as they unfolded was that in my daily life right now, I rarely categorize people based on their generation or their age. So I don't look at a person and say, oh, that person's perspective is because they're however many years old. Probably because I don't really register how old people are chronologically. I'm just there. It doesn't register for me at all. I barely know my own age at any given point in time. And yet, when I was asked to reflect on these questions about intergenerational experiences that I've had, I realized that in my cultural background is all about very specific roles and hierarchy based on which generation you occupy. Not only in the course of chronological time, but within a family, which layer of the tree you're in. And you have a very specific name that you're called because of where you sit in this hierarchy. And people address you by that special name based on your position in that tree, of the family tree. And so even though that's so rooted in all the language that I heard growing up, and so the interior of my family experience was very much about identifying generations and ascribing respect to people based on their generation, it didn't translate into my worldview and how I conduct myself, except in the following way, which is another thing that emerged from me over the course of the conversations, which is what I'm stepping into right now in terms of the courage to claim that I have a unique voice, number 1, and 2, that that unique voice has value in the world, and 3, that that voice, that unique voice, may have something to teach people who are older than me. These ideas are thresholds that I'm crossing that are only thresholds because of what I just talked about in terms of the conditioning that I had growing up, that I was always the youngest. I was the youngest in my family, but also just was always surrounded by people older than me who I felt had the answers or had the path to show or had something figured out that I needed to learn from. But it was never the other way around. They were never learning from me, at least not that they said. Maybe they did it privately because it was something that, again, didn't fit with their role as the elder. But what emerged on this call was the possibility and the promise of a circular rather than a linear model of learning from different generations. So what was shared on the call was the possibility of the elders sharing the value of what they've witnessed over a longer chronological span of time, and listening with greater respect to the millennials or in between generations who have grown up in such a rapidly changing world and therefore have the agility and the flexibility and adaptability to change more quickly, to accept change more readily. And that there's this beautiful mutuality of learning and leadership responsibility that came out of this. So the picture is much more of a matrix, a biosphere, an ecosystem interacting very much in these multiple directions and dimensions, rather than a ladder where it's going in one direction. All the listening goes up and all of the talking goes down. And so that was the emergent picture, and I just realized during the call that another aspect of the story that I am here to tell, that I hold in my experience, is the crossing of from one paradigm to another. So the opening up of a brand new awareness that there is another picture from this ladder, straight up and down, unidirectional listening, unidirectional instruction, to a web of listening, respect, teaching, learning, contribution, participation, and support. And with this mutuality, I just have to come back to Brima, which is where I first experienced what true mutual support feels like. These words, mutual support, all words are going to activate some sort of meaning in our head, which is based on our own prior experiences. When we gather new experiences, that meaning changes. Those words acquire a completely new meaning and energy. And when I experience through touch and through movement and through the breath and the body and through another body, the true experience of mutual support, where it was not a unidirectional giving and a unidirectional receiving, which again, if you think about that same model of a ladder where all the listening goes up and all the talking goes down, there's a similar ladder where all of the giving goes in one direction and all the receiving goes in another direction. And it's not true mutual support. There are roles of giver and roles of receiver that are static in a given situation. They can choose to switch roles, but it's still only happening in one direction at a time. So this is a transition to giving and receiving become one, learning and teaching become one, leading and following become one, and generations become not hierarchies but perspectives in the matrix that are so necessary to support one another. So the image that came out of this call for me was of a forest ecosystem. And of course, the forest that's closest to my heart and experience in my body is Yosemite. I've walked through it for many days, lived off of it, and just love it. And so picture whatever forest comes to mind, and just these wise trees that have been on the earth for centuries. And at Yosemite, the granite, which has been there for tens of thousands of years, And so these elements on the earth have experienced so much and held it and hold it silently. And yet there's a rich developing ecosystem around them. They're the fallen trees whose role is now to feed the forest floor by feeding the termites and ants and other creatures that ingest the wood material as it's decomposing. That material becomes the forest floor, and then there are the seedlings dropping from the live trees all the time, feeding the animals and also being spread around and taking root in the earth and becoming tiny little saplings. And as you walk through a forest, you see all of these stages of life together. And I think that's something that we've lost in the separation, in the illusion and this ladder that we've built, where there's people up here and there's people down here and they only interact in one direction. But the nature of nature is that all of these forms and stages of life coexist in a harmony that is really a mystery to the rational mind. We can only behold it and attempt to understand it through whatever system we choose to apply. But if we just step back and observe and take it in and just see with the softness of our gaze what's happening on a metaphorical level, we can create a new model and a new image of how we, as human beings living life forms on this planet, are capable of imagining to interact. I didn't say capable of interacting yet, because we have to develop the capacity to imagine that interaction before we can actually do it. So we plant the seed of an image that helps us move into action. But the image gives us the qualities that we want to bring to our actions. And that is so important as we are creating with action, with every action, that we have a sense of the qualities that we wish to bring. And that requires feeling. It requires an ability to experience and register an experience. And we can only have an experience when we're present. So I go back to the lessons of Brima there in terms of teaching me in my body what presence really is for me. It's a taste, and therefore I cannot describe it for you what that would be. You need to taste it yourself. We all need to experience it ourselves. And so the last thing I want to say is what also emerged was the power of entering into some creative process as a lesson for all of this. That when we enter into making from the blank page, from the absolute emptiness of space, from which it all emerges, we discover all of these principles of collaboration, leadership, listening, mutuality, support, respect, teaching and learning. If we enter into it in a certain way, which is the way I'm holding as the way I've experienced creative process and true creative process, and it's everything I've read from the people who practice true creative process, not imitative technical doing, but true creative process and discovery and openness. It's universal. It's the same. It doesn't matter what the medium is, and there's infinite mediums to use. the core of the process teaches us everything about relating to ourselves and others, and bringing something into being. So I'm encouraged, and I I also discovered the power of conversation to discover your unique voice. So creating an opportunity to be in conversation is such a powerful nurturer. It's food for the discovery of your unique voice. And let me just, it's again this reminder that unique voice is not something that just pops out one day in full form. Like, oh yeah, I got it. Done. Move on. And now I go into the world with my unique voice. It's this emerging discovery that comes with this continuous cultivation of practice and showing up in situations that give the food and help it grow and come in and through you. So those are my thoughts from a great conversational learning experience today. Thanks for listening.